Welcome to Chasing Hard podcast, where we talk about trusting God when life doesn't turn out the way you planned. If you have been around, have been alive for any amount of time, then you know what that means. You know what it feels like to have made plans and something happens and life doesn't go the way you thought it would go. It could be big, small. It could be life changing. It could be a temporary setback. It could be whatever. And we talk about what to do during those times. Oftentimes, the things that go wrong are things that we have been believing and trusting God for, things that we prayed about and haven't seen the answers that we want, haven't seen the change that we desire. And what do you do when that happens? And people want to say, in the midst of all that's going on in our crazy world, that God is sovereign. And He is, and that He is still in control. And ultimately, God is in control. However, He gave us free will. And everything that we do as humans, the decisions and choices that we make are not God ordained. They can't be. There's too much craziness. There's too much evil. There's too much abuse. There's too much addiction. There's too much lying and cheating and scandals and victimization and harming innocent people who can't protect themselves. Those acts are human acts. They can't be ordained by God. And yet, God is sovereign. I know it's true that we, as humans, make plans and trust God and believe God, and then things go wrong, things happen. And total transparency, I just lost my train of thought, got distracted. But things happen that to us, around us, in our world, that we know and see and recognize as evil. Here's the thing. Here's what I do know. Back to my train of thought came back. Um, Psalm 139 tells us that God knows every breath, every day of our life. It's all laid out. He knows before we take our first breath. So the things that happen in our lives, though they may shock us and derail us and give us pause and cause for great concern, God's not bothered. He's not scrambling around trying to figure it out. He's sovereign. And he can interfere. He can intervene. That's a better word. He can intervene in the things that happen around us, to those we love. But evil still happens. And he doesn't always intervene. And we don't understand. So trying to figure out how to trust God during those times, well, that's what our conversations are typically about. You may have guessed by now that it's just me today. I do have some guests lined up that I'm excited about, providing they show up. Can only do my part, which is true in all areas of life. We can only do our part. I read a quote. I just saw a quote the other day as I was scrolling through Instagram, and it said, if you're thinking you should quit your podcast, you should. And I'm like, oh, wow. Sometimes I do think that, because sometimes people don't show up, and it's sometimes hard to find people to come who wants to talk about the hard things in life. And so every now and then I do entertain that thought. And I was like, should I do that? And then someone shows up and volunteers, and here we are again, once again. But yeah, I'm, and then I get a message from a listener and of encouragement in ways that they don't know they're encouraging. They're just thanking me for doing what I do. But anyway, right now, today, this week, we're still doing it, and here we are, and it's just me. And I kind of wanted to talk about loneliness, even though that was kind of a long introduction for loneliness, and I don't even know if it would really count as an introduction, but it was the opening remarks. Loneliness is an interesting animal. You know, I know you have heard it said, and I've heard it said by a multitude of people, that we are the loneliest generation that has ever there has ever been, and yet have more opportunities to connect. And I totally agree that we are the loneliest. I'm not gonna wait, let me back up. I totally agree that we have way more opportunities to connect. I don't know about the loneliness part. I don't know if we are the loneliest population ever. I know that we are aware of how lonely we are because of the opportunities that we have to connect. And some would say it's not real connection. And I get all of those things. I get that social media has interfered, that the digital society in which we live has interfered in meaningful connections and communication. It's easy to hide behind a persona that we want, that we choose. It's easy to show the best things, the made up things. And so authenticity kind of goes away, and the opportunity to be vulnerable with each other, to share the hard parts, doesn't present itself as often. But I don't know if we're the loneliest generation to ever live. Because how can we measure that if we didn't have the same opportunities back in the 1900s, even the mid to 80s, the 1980s? Like, we didn't have all this. We didn't have this technology that we have today. How do we measure how lonely people were or weren't? Like, how do we know how lonely people were? Because here's the thing that I do know: loneliness is a part of life. I don't care who you are. I don't care how many friends you are, how satisfied you are, how fulfilled you are with your life. Loneliness is a part of life. Like, we've all felt it. Some more than others. I get it. Some people are way more lonely than others. Some people are way more alone than others. The amount and quantity of people that you interact with isn't equal to the feelings of loneliness. Like, there are people who are surrounded by people all day long, and they're still lonely. And maybe they're even lonelier than someone who's okay with living alone and doing life alone, working alone at home, maybe. Loneliness is an inside job. It's an inside feeling. It's an emotion. And it doesn't depend on our environments necessarily. Those can definitely feed into our feelings of loneliness, but loneliness is from within. And one of the things that I believe is that we are lonely because we were designed as spiritual creatures with a place in us that longs for our home. Like, this world, this earth, this temporary life of however many years we are given, it's not our forever home. It's not where we stay forever. I was having a conversation just a few minutes ago about how quickly time passes, like just the day and then the season and the year. And now all of a sudden I'm 64. Time passes quickly, and this is not the place where we stay forever. It's I was gonna say it's a gift, and it is. Sometimes it doesn't feel like one, or it feels like the ugly Christmas sweater that you get and you don't really want. Life can be hard and life can be difficult, and we can feel lonely. And I think it's because of the longing that we have to connect with our Father, with our Creator. Like there is a void in each of us that longs for that connection, that longs for that eternal place. Because even those who are Christ followers here on earth, we get lonely still. We're lonely. To keep your eyes focused on the mark, the high calling, the goal, to run the race well, to hear the words, well done, enter into your rest. Like that's the mark, that's the goal. This isn't. And I think we were created to long for that. And with that unfulfilled longing, that temporary unfulfilled longing, there comes feelings of loneliness. And maybe there are other feelings all wrapped in, but it shows up as loneliness oftentimes because we can't identify it. Like we're homesick, we're missing something, but we don't know what. We can't put our finger on what that is exactly. And it just shows up as lonely, feelings of loneliness. I don't want to discount all the ways in which we can and do feel lonely as humans, lonely as children growing up in a home where you're not noticed, where you're ridiculed, where you don't feel loved and wanted can create loneliness. Being in a marriage that's not what you thought it was going to be, that is filled with maybe dysfunctional behaviors, maybe just a lot of tension, maybe just a disconnect, and you don't know how to fix it. You don't know what went wrong. You don't know why it was never right in the first place. That creates loneliness. Having children that grow up and go to school, their first day of school creates a loneliness. Like life is a series of grieving losses, and losses and loneliness, they go hand in hand. That longing and loneliness can go hand in hand. Like all of our emotions, they're kind of tied in together. And loneliness can show up in a lot of different ways. So when we lose a loved one, whether it's divorce or they move across country or they die, that creates that loneliness that evokes the feelings of loneliness that we already have. Even if we've dealt with the things that the issues that have caused our loneliness, even if we have grieved the loss of the loved one, have grieved the loss of a relationship, have grieved the loss of that time when your kids were young and now they're gone. Even when we grieve, we still experience loneliness because it's a feeling. We have a lot of feelings. We were created to have feelings. Feelings aren't wrong. They're not bad. They're feelings. And they don't last forever. Generally, they're temporary and they come and go at will, randomly. They're fickle. They don't stay. You can't build a life or decisions based on feelings. You can't ignore them either. You need to feel them. You need to sit with them sometimes, experience them, dig into them a little deeper, and then move on and allow the next thing to happen. So I don't know about you, but I know loneliness is something that I deal with. sometimes more than others. I'm pretty self aware. I'm pretty good at identifying the feelings. Just because I do that doesn't make it easier, doesn't make me um, more prone to not be lonely. And so, for those of us who feel the feels and don't really know why, that's a more difficult road to travel. I just wanted to make loneliness an even playing field. I wanted to take the stigma away from loneliness just for a little bit, just to normalize it some because we all feel it for different reasons, whether they make sense or not. Loneliness is a part of this life, and we all experience loneliness to some degree or other at different times. You're not abnormal, you're human. I don't know what I would like to hear. I'd like when you all um, let me know how things resonate and how you experience the things that we talk about here. And so feel free to reach out and share your thoughts on loneliness. We can link arms and do it together. Walk this lonely, sometimes lonely life. Thanks for joining, for listening in on this one-sided conversation. I'm feeling a little lonely on this podcast. I'll be back next week. I hope you are too.